Welcome back to our Choice YouTube channel. In today's class, we will learn how to make this beautiful halter neck gathered dress. So it has a halter neckline on the upper part here, and the lower part is gathered. So there are gatherings around the hemline area, and it's a very simple dress and really beautiful. This is something you would like to learn. Kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so to make this now, we'll need our basic bodies. So first thing I need to draft now is my basic bodies. I'll be drafting the front and the back. So I'll need my shoulder measurements, and then my armhole measurements. Okay, my half length measurements, which is 18 inches, and then I'm going to make this into a straight line. So for my front neckline, I'll be working with a neckline of 3 inches by 3 inches for the front, and then I can now draw my shoulder slope. Okay, so the next thing now is to add my bust measurement. The bust I'm working with is 36 inches divided by 4 is going to give me 9 inches. Then I'm going to add, so I'm just going to mark the 9 inches, and then I'll add 1.5 inches allowance to it. The waist I'm working with is 28 inches divided by 4 is going to give me 7. I'm going to add 1 inch for my dart, and then I'll add 1.5 inch for my seam allowance. So I'm going to connect this together. And then I'll draw my armhole curve. So to draw my armhole curve, I'm just going to bring down my shoulder measurement, and then on the midpoint here, I'll go in by 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to draw my armhole curve. So we've been doing this already on the channel a lot, so by now I'm sure you can do this. So now I'll move to the back now and draft my back bodies also, so that we can continue. Okay, so after drafting your bodies, you need to add your dart. So for your dart, you'll be working with your bust span measurement. For me, that's 8 inches divided by 2 is going to give me 4 inches. So I'll mark 4 inches there, and then I'm going to measure up my bust point. That's from your shoulder to your nipple point, and for me that's 11. So on that point now, I'm going to measure that 4 inches, but I'll just go down by 1/2 inch. I'm not measuring it on the 11-inch mark. So I have my 4 inches there, and then I'll connect this. So this is going to be my dart line, and then for my dart, I'm going to be taking a dart of 1/2 inch. Remember, I added that allowance to my bodies when I was drafting it, and this is going to be my front dart. Okay, so I've gone ahead to draw out my back bodies. The only difference is that in the case of the back bodies, I have my zipper. There, and then for the back bodies, the dart stops at the chest area. That's where your armhole is. But for the front, the dart does not get to your armhole area. And also the back half length that I have here, as you can see, my back half length here is 16 inches, while my front half length is 8 inches. So you can see that it is longer by 2 inches against what you have in front. So now I'm going to be adding a bust dart to this so that I can control that excess. So now to act as a guide for me, I'm just going to draw out that nipple point that I have. That's 11 inches. And then I'm going to draw out my 11 inches there. So this is going to be my bust point. Okay, so this line is not straight. Okay, so this is going to be my bust point. This is my armhole line. Okay, so now the next thing now is for me to include my bust dart. So for me, I'll be working with a dart of 2 inches. So here now I'm going to measure 2 inches from my bust point. So I'll measure these 2 inches now and then I'm going to connect it to almost my BP, my bust pan. Okay, so this is my bust pan here. I'm just going to go down by half an inch, and then I'm going to connect it like that. Okay, so this is my bust dart. So now, because I don't want to have any shortage, you can just fold this dart. So you just fold your dart like this, and then I'm going to use my tracing wheel to trace out my new side line. Okay, so that I can draw out any excess, that any shortage that may come from me closing my dart. So now my dart is closed now, and then I'm just going to blend this in. So you can use your ruler to just hold it, and then you connect it from your shoulder point all the way to your side. So once I open it now, I'm going to see the shortage that I may have. So here I'm just going to draw it out like this, and then I'll connect it to my armhole. So with that, I'm not going to be having any shortage when I join my dart. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to cut out this pattern so that we can work on the neckline. Remember, this is an halter neck, so we're going to be doing some modifications to get our neckline. Okay, so I've cut this out now. This is my front body and this is my back body. So you can see the difference that we have here. By the time we close this bust dart now, it's going to be the same. You can see. So another way you can extend your bust dart, which is actually the right proper way you should do it. Remember, you have a bust dart of 2 inches here. So here you just measure half of 2 inches. That's 1 inch. So once you have your 1 inch, you connect it to the bust point here. Okay, so after connecting it to the bust point, so you make an extension of around 1 inch here. Okay, so I've cut this off, but I'm just going to add another paper underneath it so that I can use this to explain to you. So now I'm going to place this paper underneath it now and close it. So after extending this by 1 inch like this, you connect it back to that midpoint here. Then from here, from where you stopped here, you connect it. As if you don't have a tracing wheel, you connect it like this, and then from here you connect it to your underarm point. So with this, you cannot have any shortage. So after connecting like that, you're just going to cut this from here, and then you cut this like this. So you have this extension, and by the time you take in your dart, you're not going to have any shortage. So now we move quickly to the neckline. So for the neckline, I'm going to be cutting the front and back together. Remember, we're going to be reshaping the armhole area, so I'm just going to place them on each other like this. So the first thing I'm going to do now on my neckline is to go down by 1 inch or 1.5 inches, depending on how low you want it to be. So on my neckline here, I'll be going down by 1.5 inches here. Okay, so the same thing, I'll do it for the back also. So remember, the actual neckline that I have for my basic bodice is just this. So here now on my neck point, I'll just go down by 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to redraw my back neckline. Okay, to meet up with what I have here. Okay, so here also I can just make this 1.5 inches. So the easiest way to do this actually is to cut your front and back together. I have a tutorial on halter neck on the channel, so you may check that out. So in that tutorial you will see another way you can do this, but because of the bust dart that I'm adding to my front, that is why I'm cutting this front and back separately like this. Okay, so I'm just going to chop this off. I just want to use it as a guide. So now that I have this, The next thing is for me to connect from here, from this 1.5 inches all the way to my armhole to form my halter neck pattern. So from here now you can see how I'm placing it. I'm just going to connect it to the neck point like this, which is the same thing I'm going to do for the back also. So from here I'm going to connect this, so you can see that I don't really need this shape that I have here. The most important thing is for me to get my neckline and then this halter neck pattern that I have. So now you can cut this off, but before you cut it off, remember we are going to be adding a strap to it. So to know the length of the strap we're going to need, I'm going to measure my actual neckline measurement. So here now I take my tape measure now and take it around the neckline. So here I have 5 inches for the front. So neck, I'm going to write 5 inches on my front so that I don't forget. And then on the back also, I'm going to measure what you are cutting off. So here I'm measuring here, and I'm having around 4.5 inches because I'm not including my zipper allowance. So for the back I'm writing neck 4.5. So after noting that, I can now cut this off. So this is my pattern for the back, and then for the front I'm going to cut the neckline, and then from there I'm going to cut out my armhole, my new armhole. Okay, so this is what my pattern looks like for the back, for the front and back. So now we quickly move to the lower side of the bodice. So for the lower side of the bodice, I'm going to be cutting the front and back together. So the only difference is when you're placing this on your fabric to cut your back, you had your zipper allowance. So now the half length I worked with was 18 inches. So I'm going to remove that 18 inches now before I start taking my measurement. So the hip line that I'm working with is 25 inches. And the total length that I want for this dress is 30 inches. Remember, there's going to be a gather at the hem. So I'm just going to add 1 inch allowance to add that gather to it. And I have 31 inches. So I'm going to make this into a straight line. Okay. So now the waist measurement that I'm working with is 7 inches. So I have 7 inches here. I'm going to add a dart of 1 inch, half inch on both sides, and then I'm going to add 1.5 inch for my seam allowance. Then tentatively I'm just going to add my hip line. So my hip measurement, the hip measurement I'm working with is 40. Divided by 4 is going to give me 10, and then I'm going to add 1.5 inch seam allowance to that also, and that is all I need. So now I'm going to be connecting from my waist to my hip. Okay, then for my dart, the same dart that I worked with, 4 inches, and then the dart leg is going to be, the dart is going to be 5 inches or 4.5 inches long. So I'm going to measure that 4 inches here again so that I can have a straight line. And then I'm going to be taking a dart of 1/2 inch on both sides and connect it to my dart leg. Okay, so now I have my dart. So for the basque effect that we have before we had our gathers, I'm going to be connecting from my actual, I'm not including the allowance, from my actual hip line measurement there. I'm going to connect it using a straight ruler. So if you want it straight, you just use this sharp side, and if you want it a bit bent, you use this curved part. So now from there I'm going to be connecting to my length, to my actual gown length in a V shape like this, and then I'm going to cut this out. So we're going to be cutting this now on our fabric. And remember that I said for this skirt part, if you're going to be cutting on for your back, all you just need is to add your allowance, your zip allowance. So let me just notice that, add zipper allowance for back so that I don't forget. So now I'll go over now and cut all of this on my fabric, and then I'll bring it back for us to continue. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut my fabric now. So I just placed my pattern. So this is the front. For the front, remember that it has to be on fold because there's not going to be any joining on the front. So this dart area now, you can just notch it so that it's going to be easy for you to know where your dart will be when you want to sew it. So this is the front and this is the back. Okay, so this is my back now. So for the skirt part, like I said, I cut my front and back together. So this is my front here without the zipper allowance, and this is the extension that I have for my back for my zipper allowance. So this is actually how it's going to be. This is the center part, and when you're cutting the front, remember that it has to be on fold, while the back that's going to have the zipper is going to be separate like this. So if your pattern is well drafted, so let me just remove this so that the front and back is going to be separate. So if your pattern is well drafted, like I said, your upper part and lower part have to be the same. Remember, you are still going to join it together. So for my front now, if I remove my front part now and I place it on my waist, you can see that I have exactly the same thing. Okay, and then for the back, if I take the back now and then I place the waist area on it, so you can see what I have now. I'll have exactly the same thing. They have to match. Okay, can we see this? They just have to match because you are sewing it together. So now to sew this, I'm going to sew in my dart for both my upper bodies and my lower bodies, and then join it together on the half length and on the side. Then I'm going to bring it back to show us. Okay, so I've gone ahead to take in my dart. I just thought to show us. So this is my back and these are my two fronts. So for your bust dart, you just take it like this and then sew it. That's how you take your bust dart, and you can see that it's already giving me that bust effect there. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew my upper bodies to the lower bodies. Okay, that's the next thing to do. So when you're sewing this, you make sure that the dart line matches. So you can see what I have there. So the dart has to be on the same point. Once they match like this, you join it together. So this is what the front is going to look like, and because we have two for the back, I'm going to be joining it separately. So this is the first side of the back. Okay, so this is the first side of the back and this is the second side. So after joining the upper part to the lower part, the next thing is for me to sew it on the sides, on the two sides. So I'll do this now and bring it back to show us. So I've gone ahead to sew this now, and you can see, so you just need to weave it because I'm not going to be fixing lining to this. So I just sew it. This is the center back. I just sew it before adding your zipper. If that is what you want to add in, if you're adding button or whatever it is you want to add, you just need to press your zipper allowance open. So I've also joined this on the sides. So if I turn it out, this is what it's looking like. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do now is to measure my hem. That's where I have my basque effect. So you take your tape measure now and measure each round so that I can cut the fabric for your gathers. So from the side now, I'm going to measure like this to the center, and then I'm going to measure it like this. So here I have around 24 inches. So for front and back now, I'm just assuming I have 48 inches or approximately 50 inches. So the next thing is for you to cut a fabric okay, to know the length of your fabric. So let me explain this well. To know the length of your fabric, remember that we stopped our length at 30 inches when we were drafting. Okay, and the actual length for this dress that I want this dress to be is 42 inches. So I stopped at 30 because I'm going to be adding gathers to this. So now to know the length of the fabric you're cutting, you subtract your 30 inches from the 42 inches, and that's going to give me 12 inches. So now I have 12 inches to be my length, and the width of the fabric is going to be these 50 inches that we measured round multiplied by 2 or 3, depending on how full you want this to be. So if you want it really full, you can multiply this 50 inches by 3, and that's going to give you 150 by the 12 inches that I want my full length to be. And then if you don't have enough fabric, you can multiply it by 2 or 2.5. So now I've gone ahead to cut a long fabric, and you can see that I joined this together so that it can be long enough for me. So what I did is just multiplying this by 2.5 inches because I don't have enough fabric, and that is the width. And then the length that I have now is 12.5. Okay, so when you're cutting yours, you increase it because you're going to be hemming it on the lower part. So I actually cut 13 inches, and then I've hemmed it here on the lower part so that it can be neat. I just left the part that I'm going to be sewing to this hem like this. So now you may want to serge this so that it's going to be neat, and at the end of the day I have 12.5. So the half inches left here is what I'm going to use to sew it. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead now and gather this on the hemline round. So I'm going to gather this round the hem of this dress. Okay, so I've gone ahead to add my gathers, and you can see that it is added now. You can see the basque effect that we have on that lower part, and this is what it looks like on the wrong side. So I just opened it on the seam allowance to add it so that I can neatly close everything up back, and this is what I'm going to have. So for your back, you make sure that your V is matching like this. It has to be the same so that it's not going to be looking awkward. So now our dress is almost done. The last thing now is to add our small collar. Okay, it's just like a strap. So to cut this strap now, you will need that neckline measurement that we marked earlier. Remember, I indicated that my neckline for the front is 5 inches, and then for the back is 4.5 inches. So I'm going to be adding the neck for front and back together, and that's going to give me 9.5 inches. So when I was taking this measurement, remember I did not include my seam allowance to it. So now I'll measure what I have on my seam allowance, and that's 1 inch. So I'll add that 1 inch to the 9.5. That's going to give me 10.5 for one side of my neckline. Remember, these are just half scale bodies. So for the other side, I just need to multiply what I have here by 2, and 10.5 multiplied by 2 is going to give me 21 inches. So that is what I'm going to use to cut my neckline band. So to cut this band, you can cut it in form of a bishop collar, but I don't have enough fabric, so I just have few fabric left. So I'm just going to put my fabric on bias like this so that it can fold well for me, and then I'm going to measure the 21 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to measure 22 inches by around 1 inch, so that by the time I finish sewing it, I'll be left with just half inch. So I'll go ahead and cut this now and bring it back to show us. Okay, so I've cut this now. I have 21 inches here by 1 inch, and then I went ahead to iron it so that it's going to make it easier for me and neat to work with. So now this is just 1 inch by 21 inches. So now I'm going to notch the midpoint of this. So like I was saying, I'm going to put this on fold, the 22 inches with the allowance, and then I'm going to notch the midpoint like this. So this midpoint now, I'm going to notch the midpoint of my front neckline also, and then I'll match it together. So I'm notching my front neckline on the midpoint also, and then I'm going to match this together like this. So I will sew it up to here, and then the rest that I have here, I'm going to sew it to the neckline, starting from the zipper area all the way. So this is going to be the strap. This leftover that you have here is going to be the strap that you're going to have left. Let me just pin this so that we will see what I'm trying to explain well. So now you can see how I'm pinning the rest to my center back. So in this case, you have to be sure that you have your exact neckline measurement. So when you're drafting, don't forget to measure it before you cut it out. So now for the front, I'm just going to pin them against each other. That's the center part. So I'm pinning it. I'm pinning it, and this is what I have. So after pinning it now, I'm going to fold it over again and then sew the excess on it so that I can have my band. So yours may not be as big as this, depends on what you want. So this excess that you have here is what is going to go round your neckline, and then we'll do the same thing for this other side also. So I'll go and do this now, and then I'll bring it back to show us what we have. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew this to the neckline. So before you sew it, make sure you hem your armhole area correctly, you hem it neatly with a bias or by simply folding it in like this. So everything needs to be neat. This is what the band is looking like now. You can see that it's a bit tiny because this is the length that I want. You can make yours wider. Okay, so if you want it wider, you can just use like 1.5 inch or 2 inches for your band. So this is what we have now. I'm going to take this to the mannequin so that we can see what this looks like. Okay, so this is what our dress is looking like. You can see how lovely this is looking. So you just need to give this a good press and you're good to go. So this is what it looks like on the front area. This is the neckline band that will attach to this, and the back is just like on the back. So I decided to just add button to it. So where my pin is, I'm just going to fix a button and hem it neatly and weave it neatly on this zipper allowance. So if you're going to be adding zipper, you just add your zipper to where you have your zipper allowance, and this is what the hem of the back is looking like. You can see how beautiful this halter neck is looking. I hope you enjoyed making this tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.